Hello and welcome to the Keep Right On podcast, where I'm Alex Dicken and I'm joined by my co-host and colleague Brian Dick. And this week we are joined by the Shropshire Star's Shrewsbury Town correspondent Ollie Westbury, just to discuss that game very briefly before we go into the usual shenanigans and everything related to Birmingham City afterwards. Brian, I'll start with you. How are you doing after the long international break?
Feels like we've given up football, doesn't it? Honestly, this third international break has been torture. Particularly, I think, maybe going into the back of it off a slightly underwhelming draw with Northampton. Just feels like it's taken forever to get back on the horse. Happily, that problem is going to be well and truly over, isn't it, in the next 70 days? What's the stat you keep trotting out?
Minimum 17 games in 70 days. Likelihood is that it'll be 18. That's a game every 3.8 days. Could even be 20 if those two rearranged games come in that time. So going to be very busy. Thank God for that, because I've been sick of international breaks every 4 or 5 games. But yeah, on to Shrewsbury. Ollie, thank you for coming on. Might as well get started, really. It's been a bit of a busy international break for you. You've had a good one, really, haven't you, as far as news is concerned, with the managerial change. Gareth Ainsworth coming in as the new Shrewsbury manager. Talk to us about that first and foremost. How's it been, and how do you think he'll change things this week going into the game against Blues?
Yeah, well, on international breaks, I was delighted for an international break because Shrewsbury ain't got no international, so they normally play, which means I don't get the weekend off. So I was delighted for an international break, and then it so happens that they have to sack their manager over it, doesn't it? So, yeah, it's been very busy. We're very not unsure, but kind of everybody's kind of this like waiting with like bated breath to see what's actually going to happen on Saturday. A new man in the dugout. I mean, Shrewsbury's form this season has been, quite frankly, terrible. They've won, two games out of 15. 8 points from 15, bottom of the League One table. It's been a pretty miserable existence following them up and down the country. But I suppose, as ever, with a managerial change, it gives everybody the opportunity to wipe the slate clean, and it gives them, the chance to those players that have potentially been out of favour will get the opportunity, under the new boss to kind of, reset, gather themselves and put their case forward to play, at the weekend. So we don't know what we're going to see with regards to team selection. We don't know what we're going to see with regards to formation. We don't really have any idea. We've got some like inklings from what Ainsworth's done in the past. He's played before at the back, at the past, from what we gather. But it's very much a case of who knows. The only thing I would say is hopefully it can't get any worse than what it was before. But they are always famous last words, aren't they? But, he's been working on the training ground this week. He's probably a bit of a coup for Shrewsbury, to be honest. The last couple of managers that they've employed have been kind of relieved from League Two positions. And obviously Ainsworth's last job was in the Championship, Queen's Park Rangers. So I think fans feel really optimistic about this appointment. And to be fair, I expect it to probably be the best atmosphere of the season, with obviously I'm sure that the Blues end will be, sold out, and everybody kind of coming to, see Ainsworth's first game, and with a little bit of optimism, because it has felt very flat at the Crowd Meadow this season, that's for sure.
I watched his first interview, sat through it hoping for like little nuggets of information and to get a bit of insight ahead of the game this week, and he was very secretive. Like every question, he was effectively batting it away, and that's even to a clubhouse, in-house media team. So yeah, I got nothing from that, Ollie. So good luck putting your predicted team down for this week. Talk to us in general, really, about Shrewsbury this season. How bad has it been? Because Blues played them in the Bristol Street Motors, didn't they, about 6 weeks ago, and walloped them with a team that probably was very much second string. So how bad has it been in League One?
I was trying to find the right analogy to describe it, and this is a pretty bad one, but it was one I thought of the other day. It's like Shrewsbury's defence to this point of the season, if it was like a 10-foot python and it knocked on the door, they'd find a way to let it in, because they're just absolutely, kamikaze at the back. They've kept one clean sheet all season. I think in the last 7 games, I'm not 100% sure, but they let in 2 goals a game. So when you let in, I think it's 1. They lost 1-0 at Bristol Rovers. They've lost 6 on the bounce now. Even when they played like League Two opposition in Salford, they kind of still managed to let 2 goals in and get knocked out of the FA Cup. I think in the first time in like 10 years that they've been knocked out in the first round of the FA Cup. So as you can imagine, I'm not painting a particularly optimistic picture, which kind of suggests that actually, given the fact that, they're so almost down and out, it'll probably be a more challenging afternoon than you would perhaps expect for Blues, because it kind of feels like there's nothing to lose for them, really. But yeah, the defending has been a clear and obvious issue that, I've kind of talked about and written about for a good few months. The inability to keep the ball out of the net. They made the pitch bigger this season, which, on reflection, just seems a kind of bizarre thing to do when you've got one of the lowest budgets in the league and everybody else's players are better than yours. So ultimately, it's not been very good. And there's probably no other way to dress it up. The fans are, angry, and there's been probably quite a lot of apathy towards the club. So this chance of Gareth Ainsworth coming in has given Shrewsbury, I suppose, the chance to wipe the slate clean and a chance of a fresh start after what has been a really, really difficult, first few months of the football season. So, I suppose they're just keeping their fingers crossed that, Gareth Ainsworth's got a magic wand and he can find a way to get some points on the board, because otherwise it's going to be League 2 for us next year.
Do you think it'll be a full house at the Crown Meadow on Saturday?
I'd be surprised if it's not very close. I think there's still some people that probably, decide that they will not go until the owner's gone. And the owner's done like a very good job over 28 years on the whole. But I think there's quite a lot of this aggression and disappointment and anger directed in his vicinity. So I feel like some people just will not move past it until, like the old football fans do, until like they move on and there's a chance for a proper fresh start. But others and the more loyal fans are probably, more likely to kind of come back out to see what this new kind of team, I mean, not new team because they're the same players, but under new leadership can actually achieve. So yeah, I would expect it to be close to. I'm sure we'll have a good idea by the time Saturday comes around if it will be a full house, but I suppose that'll make it all the more challenging for Blues, to be fair.
Yeah. And just lastly, before we let you go, you've painted a really bleak picture so far, but are there any players that Blues should be wary of going into the game?
It's funny because that's not the first time I've been asked this question. And every time I say, I'm not really sure. Everybody's had an opportunity and the results have just not really improved. I was talking on our podcast, our in-house podcast yesterday about it. And if there's any personnel that Gareth Ainsworth can put into the team that haven't really played, that can come and, make a difference. I feel like at some stage or another, everybody's, started games and the results just haven't really picked up. One of the more talented, they've got a couple of young, talented loanees. Tommy O'Reilly on loan from Aston Villa looks like somebody who's going to have a decent career at a higher level than Shrewsbury, I would expect. He's still young and it's still pretty much his first loan move. Leo Castledine's another good young player from on loan from Chelsea. And he's also another player who looks like, he's going to have a decent career. But aside from that, really, that there's no kind of standout performers. You've got the more senior League One players like Carl Winchester and Jordan Shipley, who were part of Steve Cottrell's side that finished 12th. So I think they have proven, they both played 40 games that season, that they can, be consistent League One performers, but, through via injury and form, probably haven't quite hit the heights that they would have liked to this season. So, yeah, it's a tough one, but it's been that kind of tough. Like, if we lose on Saturday, which is probably a good chance, they've taken 8 points from 16 games. It's obviously half a point a game. So you can imagine kind of what it's been like from a performance point of view.
Brian, anything to add before we let Ollie get on his way?
No, I'm conscious of the fact Ollie wants to go out running now. I've just got this image of Ollie tiptoeing through the snow. I think what we would say about Gareth Ainsworth is he's built his reputation at Wycombe on a very direct, very workmanlike side. And I just wondered if there was anyone in the Shrewsbury team, without turning this into a Shrewsbury podcast, that could potentially be that target man that, would maybe give Shrewsbury that focal point tomorrow on Saturday.
Yeah, and that's probably another issue. They've only got two strikers. George Lloyd is quite a diminutive figure. He's got a real big leap on him, but he's only about 5'8". He's quite a short, and then the other one is John Marquis. So that they haven't got a big kind of hold the ball up kind of striker, which makes that potential style of play challenging. So I imagine that what we're going to see is a team on Saturday that's absolutely going to put their bodies on the line and is going to focus on defending first rather than, trying to play football. They've let a few at the start of the season. They tried to play a bit too much and they gave goals away very needlessly. So I would imagine that what we're going to see from Shrewsbury is Blues having 80% of possession and Shrewsbury having everybody inside their own half, trying desperately to stop the ball coming into the box and, clearances, volleys, blocks, that's how I am envisaging the game going. I think that's also what Shrewsbury need to do, because they need to stop letting goals in first, because you ain't going to win no game if you're 2-0 down at half time every week.
We love a low block on this podcast.
You don't know what you've done there, Ollie. We're suffering from low block trauma here.
Oh right, yeah. Well, I imagine, but that's partly because you've got good players, though, isn't it? And if they come up and play against Blues and are really open, then you've got better players, so you'll win. So I can kind of see, but I can imagine how that makes life a bit boring for you at times as you pass it back across the back four.
Ollie, thank you very much for coming on. Appreciate it, mate. Take care. I'll boot you out now so you can go and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, chaps.
Shall we start with that? Is there anything you do to negate the blow block and get around it?
Well, you can't negate it, can you? It's a fact. If Ollie's right and Shrewsbury do sit deep and have lots of centre halves in their own penalty area, what the Blues need to do, they need to move the ball quicker. They spent a lot of time in the last few games sort of passing nicely in front of defenders, rather than sort of actually sort of teasing them out of position or anything like that, or really engaging them. They need to move the ball quicker. They need to somehow find a way of getting into a good position for a cross. Maybe need to have more pot shots from around the box. For me, tempo is the absolute key, and then just in reference to who's putting the ball into the box and where they're putting it in from. I wonder if there are one or two selection issues. Can you make a case for putting a Yokoyama in? Does Gardner Hickman deliver a better ball or Alphonse Samstead deliver a better ball than Ethan Laird? These are the things that Chris Davis will have been not kicking around. He'll have been absolutely pouring over them in the last sort of 10 days or so, won't he?
Yeah. Do you want to go on to team selection straight away, because that's at the bottom of the running order, or do you want to look at internationals first? Which way do you want to go, Brian?
Let's do the internationals first, because some of the guys have been away and they've travelled long distances, so that might affect the team selection that we're going to come up with. So go for that. So Peck's been away, hasn't he? Where's Peck been? Yeah,
so he got 5. So Peck's been away with South Korea, played as a substitute in their 3-1 win over Kuwait, and was an unused substitute in their 1-1 draw with Palestine. Alphonse Samstead had a bit of a chastening evening against Wales in midweek. Willemsen was a substitute in that game. Willemsen was also a sub in their 2-0 win over Montenegro. Samstead didn't play in that game. So Samstead has probably had about 60-odd minutes. Willemsen, 2 sub appearances, so similar minutes again. Dykes was a sub in Scotland's win over Croatia and started their win over Poland. It's been a very productive international break for him. Bailey Peacock-Farrell, which again, it's a bit irrelevant because he's a backup goalie at the moment, but he was on the bench for both of Northern Ireland's games, so it seems that he's lost his place there as well. the one I want to look at from those is Dykes more than anything else. You know, he's kind of, it's a weird one because he's third choice striker at Blues, really, isn't he, at the moment? And yet he goes away with his country and he's very much at the forefront. He started away at Poland. He played a prominent role in their win over Croatia. The goal came late in that, so he was on the field as a substitute. He seems to have been preferred to Shay Adams in some of their games earlier international breaks this season. What's the answer to getting in the team at Blues? It's just not going to happen. Is he going to be a sub this season, do you think? Or do you think they'd just be selected games? Or do you think he can actually get an extended run in the 11 as the striker?
As the striker, which means you take Jay out of the striking position.
Put him as a 10, yeah.
Which Chris Davis has seemed very reluctant to do. I actually think there's a sign of an understanding or a sort of a complementary skill set between Dykes and Stansfield. I think the way they move around each other is quite promising. Was it Rotherham away this season where they started together? And I actually thought there was a sort of a cohesion to why they linked up. Lyndon Dykes. Does he? If you play him, does that mean you have to play a certain way? Do you have to be a little bit more direct? I don't think it does it? Because he's not the traditional target man, is he?
No, there are ways of being direct as well. It doesn't have to be like lumped from back to front, does it? I suppose they can work their way into wide areas, and they get into a lot of good wide positions, particularly through Ethan Laird. And you just think maybe if Dykes was in there and they could hang the ball up to him, that he would obviously be a better option in those positions than Alfie May, who's 5'7", 5'8", or Jay Stansfield is probably about 5'9", 5'10". So maybe he could be a solution. I always feel like when they bring him on at the moment, it's when they're obviously looking to either kill a game or win a game, or at Charlton get back into a game, and they don't really change the way they play. It's kind of a lot of tippy-tappy stuff in and around the box, and that probably doesn't suit his game. I felt like he was really good at Rotherham because he occupied the centre-backs and it created a lot of space for Stansfield. Both goals Blues scored that day was Stansfield making runs in behind while Dykes had dropped deep and taken centre-backs with him, or a centre-back with him. He wasn't as effective in the games after that. I think against Mansfield, he was useful first half, was involved in the goal there. Lost his way a little bit in the second half and obviously missed a couple of good chances there. So he also, to be fair, if he is going to play, he does need to start scoring. Need to start taking chances, because Blues' other two strikers, which we're going to come on to soon, because that is probably the biggest talking point at the club at the moment, have both scored 6 and 7 goals this season. So their records and tallies probably have them ahead of Dykes at the moment.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one. Dykes feels a bit more like Plan B rather than Plan A at the moment, doesn't he? And as you say, potentially someone that will come on after an hour or of frustration, or to see out a game or something like that. I would think, let's say, is it 18 games in 70 days? Do you say 17 games in 70 days?
17 or 18, yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Dykes start 5 or 6 of those. I think that's possible. And then if he gets a goal in the first or second game of those and goes on a bit of a run, then the place is there to be taken, isn't it? I don't think Chris Davis is closed off to anyone in form. So yeah, I think he'll get an opportunity, and I think I'm here for it as well, I would say.
Yeah, I do think it's very open in those front four positions, isn't it? In general, maybe Stansfield and Willemsen, who we've said are probably going to be your starters, but the two other positions do feel quite open. Yeah,
indeed, they do. The rest of the side is sort of almost calcified into written in stone, isn't it? With maybe there's a bit of discussion around right back that we'll come on to, but certainly the centre back pairing, Chris Davis seems to have his preference there. Well, he does have his preference there. And everyone's got a preference in midfield. Although I was chatting to a Blues fan on the dog walk this morning, and he would like to see Leonard rotated with Peck and Iwata, and game time spread fairly evenly between the three of them. So, but yeah, Chris Davis does seem to have 7 or 8 positions written in ink, and the ones that aren't in ink are the configuration and the identity of the attackers.
Yeah, on the main talking point then, May and Stansfield. I do want to read out a few stats that I put down. So, Alfie May was the hero at the start of the season, wasn't he, Brian? 4 goals in his first 4 league games for Blues, but only has 1 goal in his last 9 league games. So, obviously, the big thing that has changed in that time is that Blues signed Stansfield right after his 4th league game. And Stansfield has scored 7 in 11 games, since then. May has scored twice, once in the league and once in that thumping of Fulham's children in the Bristol Street Motors. So it's quite clear now that Jay Stansfield's presence has had an effect on Alfie May's, if not performance levels, certainly his goals tally, as we kind of thought it would from the outset because of the positional change.
Well, obviously he's not starting at number 9, and the guy who is starting at number 9 is scoring goals and getting chances. So yeah.
So what do you think the solution is, Brian? I mean, I think we've all kind of got this idea that, because when Dykes has come into the 11, Jay Stansfield has played slightly deeper, hasn't he? So we're all there like, why can't Chris Davies do something similar with Alfie May in the 11? Because we know Jay Stansfield is very competent and comfortable in that number 10 position. But he does seem very reluctant to do that, I think, because he likes the idea of Stansfield playing on the shoulder, as he said multiple times. And he also thinks that Alfie May has a tendency and ability to drop deep and get involved in play, and he likes the idea of him doing that. So he probably thinks that he suits both their games. But for whatever reason, when Alfie May goes to take up those positions in attacking areas, at the moment he does seem to be getting in Stansfield's way a little bit, or not being able to get into the space he wants to because Stansfield is in those spaces. And I would say, over the games they have played together, I don't think it's worked, that well. I can't think of many games where I think they've really been in sync together and playing well and feeding off each other. Obviously, I think Stansfield set up May against Huddersfield for the winning goal there. They both missed a couple of chances before that. But May hasn't looked anywhere near as effective in the Blues 11 since Stansfield came in. So it does beg the question for me as to whether it's worth keeping May in the 11 as a number 10.
Listen, I like Villinson as the 10. I think Keshi Anderson can be quite successful as a 10. Strangely, we've seen Scott Wright come in and have some real joy, not as a number 10, but in number 10 kind of positions. Lyndon Dykes can sort of drop in there as well, potentially. Listen, I go around in circles with the May and the May J debate as I'm trying to frame it, and no one else doesn't seem to be catching on whatsoever. When Jay Stansfield came to Blues last season and John Eustace was playing him on the left wing, I remember us sitting here and saying, you've got to get Jay Stansfield closer to goal. He's the most obvious source of goals. And Chris Davies is doing that, and we're not happy with that either. I don't know what the right answer is, really. You spend what Blues spent on a striker and you play him as a striker, surely, don't you? And, and I do think Jay, is some way ahead of the competition, not just May but Dykes as well for that number 9 role. So just listen, if a winger comes, if Yokoyama comes into the side, or Hansen gets fit and comes back, or Wright is fit and plays, if one of those wing wide players comes back and absolutely cements the berth on the flank, left or right wing, then the debate's over, really, isn't it?
Yeah. I think part of the thinking for me, at least my theory behind why Chris Davies wants to play Jay Stansfield as the 9 is that, I think Davies has been planning. He's trying to bed players in now for when hopefully Blues can go into the Championship and kind of hit the ground running in a similar way to what Ipswich did 12 months ago, and have kind of the building blocks in place. And I feel like he's got probably 6 or 7 building blocks in their place. And Stansfield as the 9 is one. I think when Blues do get to the Championship, or if, Brian, Stansfield is your number 9, isn't he? I don't think Alfie May is going to be your number 9 in the Championship. Not at the level that Blues want to be at. I think he could be an option, but I don't think he'll be a starting number 9 every week. Whereas Stansfield in the Championship, he scored 13 goals for Blues at that level, a struggling Blues team at that level. So he's clearly got the ability to do very well in the second tier, and I think he is your number 9. So maybe Chris Davies just doesn't want to tinker with his position too much at this stage when Blues are building for the long term.
But yeah, that's it. I think. Sorry, I'm sat in here with the dog, and she's just started to decide to start scratching her chin. So you can hear a noise in the background. That's what it is. Yeah, should we go on to the team selection for Saturday? I think we were both kind of on the same hymn sheet, really, weren't we?
We were, in agreement for once.
We were. So both went Ryan Alsop in goal, obviously. Both went for a back four of Ethan Laird, Christoph Clara, Christian Bielik and Alex Cochrane. The Pekka Iwata axis in the middle of midfield. And then the attacking three, we both felt that Keshi Anderson, Willem Willemsen and Yokoyama was the way to go, with Stansfield as the 9. I suppose the one that leaps out there is Yokoyama, isn't it, for both of us? Give us your thoughts on why Yokoyama for his first League One start.
I think for this game it's relatively low risk, isn't it? Because Yokoyama played in the cup game against Shrewsbury. He's more than comfortable in that game, more than good enough to play in a game of this magnitude against one of the lesser teams in League One. I think it's a nice little trial game for him in the 11. I also really like the idea of him being the left winger rather than Keshi Anderson, because I think Yokoyama will give you that natural width and that natural speed, whereas Anderson I like on the other side on the right, because I feel like he's got a great ability to come inside and link play with Willemsen and Stansfield, as Anderson did actually in that cup game when he played centrally and was really productive with Wright and May on that occasion. So I like Anderson in that position. I think there's a need to get Willemsen in more central positions. I know he does naturally tend to drift inside when he starts on the right and come in Blue's usual system, but I just think having him in the middle permanently is the right way to go and kind of limit any defensive responsibility he's got when Blues are out of possession. Not that I expect they'll be out of possession a lot of Shrewsbury, but I just think it'd be good to get him in the middle behind Stansfield and see how that partnership can work. With Alfie May dropping out, I think he would be the only player to drop out. My thinking there is that I'd rather him be a striker or a substitute at this stage, like either playing second fiddle to Stansfield and coming in sometimes, or starting as the striker. So I think Yokoyama, Willemsen and Anderson gives you a better balance across those three positions.
Yeah, I agree. And if, as I said at the start of the episode, if Blues are sat looking at 10 players in a penalty area, I think Yokoyama has got that burst of pace that will maybe draw a foul or win a penalty or, win a corner or just get past a player. I think what I like about Yokoyama is he comes inside onto his right. Yes, he does, but he also goes outside onto his left as well. And we've seen him. He's not shy to use his left foot to put a cross in. So I think that versatility and the sort of the raw physical skills, just that explosive pace. And yes, there's not going to be a lot of room to run in behind. If Shrewsbury were playing, the Shrewsbury defence was 40 yards upfield, you'd absolutely go Yokoyama all day long because, he'd be gone in a cloud of dust, wouldn't he? But I just do think he's just got that little bit of explosiveness, even against a massed defence. I guess we'll find out in the next couple of days as to whether Scott Wright or indeed Emil Hansen has recovered from their injury. Wright was in the ballpark, wasn't he? Thinking back to to our last interface with Chris Davis.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if one of them wasn't closer after the international break. I'm not sure whether they'll come straight into the 11 because they obviously won't have played in a few weeks, probably both actually in 3 or 4 weeks. So yeah, hopefully one or two, one of them is back. The thing about Yokoyama actually, and Ollie mentioned that Shrewsbury have increased the size of their pitch, which when Blues played there in the Bristol Street, it did feel like a big pitch, didn't it?
Yeah.
I thought that on the night, and there were plenty of spaces for Yokoyama, for Wright as well on the other side. So I think that also plays into selecting Yokoyama, and also the fact that Blues, without Wright and Hansen in recent weeks, haven't had a great deal of speed in their attack, have they? They haven't really had anyone who's able to go past players. So that's another reason why I'd select Yokoyama, just for a little bit of unpredictability, because they have, for me, become a little bit predictable in the last couple of League One fixtures, or in the last few fixtures in general. But
with Yokoyama, there is that you worry about the back door being open, don't you? And it happened against Northampton, didn't it? When they had that good chance that was cleared off the line, Yokoyama let his man in. And I think back to the Bristol Street Trophy game at Shrewsbury, and Yokoyama, he got a bit of a telling off in that game as well for a defensive lapse in concentration. But if you've got the ball 80% of the time, then there's only going to be so many of those situations, aren't there? So yeah, I think we both agree on that one. One of the takes we've had is from Mark Lawley, and he says Gardner Hickman is a better fullback than Laird. Is the right back up for debate, do you feel, Alex?
I don't think it is in the eyes of Chris Davies. I feel like, given how quickly he's put Laird back into the 11 and obviously how integral Laird was at the start of the season, I feel like he sees him as his first choice right back. I think he likes Laird's physical attributes and that he can get into attacking positions, and he's obviously got a lot of speed to go past players. I think both of us have questioned Laird's final ball a few times. This season, I think he has let him down a couple of times, and he would have had more assists by now if it was a good final ball. And I think because Gardner Hickman did so well in that period, kind of, and has just been put out the team, I think a few people are longing for him. And I understand it to an extent because he did very well, but I just think Chris Davies is going to keep going with Laird. I think it's a good conversation to have, particularly if results, I say don't improve. Blues have drawn 2 League One games in a row, but if results kind of, plateau a little bit, I think it's a conversation worth having, but I just can't change it.
Yeah, particularly if if you're looking for width in the attack, Laird is that width on the right, isn't he?
Yes, yeah.
And I don't think you throw the baby out with the bathwater in that situation. You do need to stress the defence and try and sort of bring them out into areas that they're going to be less comfortable in against someone of Laird's pace and skill set. But again, like I said about the other point about Dykes, I do think that with so many games coming, I don't know if Ethan Laird's going to start everyone and play every minute of every one of those 17 games. So Gardner Hickman is very much in the debate because he was impressive, albeit not as a recognised out and out sort of authentic right back.
Is Alphonse ever going to get into this debate, you think?
I mean, I like him actually. I've spoken to a couple of ex-players who sort of question whether he's physical enough. It's sort of defensive discipline. But for me, who has never been an ex-professional footballer and just calls it as a with what I see in my limited knowledge, I quite like him, don't you?
Yeah, I think he's quite tidy. I was really impressed with his early performances. I think he's probably suffered through not playing much football and has looked a little bit rusty on his more recent appearances. But during that spell where Blues were on that winning run and he was coming into the team for Gardner Hickman for the final 20-25 minutes, I thought he looked really good. And I actually thought, was it going into the Charlton game after a really good half against Huddersfield? I thought he might get a start there in the league, but obviously Chris Davies went with Gardner Hickman again, and he hasn't really changed much, as he does like to stick with a consistent 11. But yeah, I'm surprised Samson hasn't been given a chance yet, because obviously Laird has had a lengthy injury already this season. But there's still time, isn't there? And I'm sure they won't be in a rush to cancel that loan or rearrange that loan. I think they'll give it time to work. Yeah,
indeed. We've got one more take from Corvin Tage. A third of the season has gone, and I feel lessons are not being learned about how the opposition is stifling our attack. Charlton, Lincoln, Mansfield, Bolton, and now Northampton. Blues dominated possession in every game, but had the same or perhaps one more shot on goal than the opposition. I mean, that is a way to look at what's happening, isn't it? It is a take. Blues are having a lot of possession, and you feel that possession should be producing more goals. But I don't want to get too negative, because they've won 9 of 13, haven't they? And had you offered this points return at the start of the season with so much uncertainty and so many new players, I would certainly have taken it.
I do think the shot on goal thing is a little bit unfair as well. It probably, if you look at the Northampton game, Blues had plenty of shots. I think they had 20 shots and only 3 were on target. So, okay, Blues have had 3 shots on goal. But if you look at their best chances in that game, a lot of them weren't on goal because they didn't hit the target. So the criticism is probably of the finishing, and that they do need to be better when they get into those positions. I mentioned that Huddersfield game earlier, how that ended 1-0. I'll never know, because it was the most one-sided 1-0 second half I've ever seen in my life. It could have been 5-6-0 quite easily with the chances Blues had. And there have been a few games this season. All the games have been close, which, again, feeds into the low block. Teams are, aiming to keep it tight against Blues, aren't they? And hoping to get a chance like, Northampton did, and they took it at the end. So, Yeah, it has been repetitive and it has been frustrating. Low blocks are the theme. I just hope that Blues, can start consistently finding a way around it and to beat it, because it's annoying me. It really is annoying me. But again, like Ollie said, we shouldn't be annoyed because Blues have got the best players, the biggest budget, and they're going to come up against us because if teams went toe to toe with Blues, they'd lose. Simple as that, wouldn't they? The players Blues have got at this level, so we can't be too angry for teams with a fraction of the budget that Blues have got coming St Andrews and sticking 10, 11 men behind the ball, can we?
No, it's a bit Arsene Wenger-y, isn't it?
It is.
He always used to complain about teams going to Arsenal and defending and not letting his beautiful footballers express themselves. It's the game, isn't it? Just a question from Blues KRO 1875. The transfer window opens in, let's do some quick maths, December is 31, we're the 20th today, 42 days the transfer window opens, which is 6 weeks. Are there any plans for signings or departures in January, particularly in the light of recent reports about Sanderson potentially leaving the club? What do you think will happen? Just you can do Sanderson specifically, or what do you think generally will happen in January, Alex?
I think Sanderson's a good example. I feel like it's going to be quite a reactive transfer window for Blues. They signed 17 players in the summer, have a really well-stocked squad of 25, 26 players. Providing none of those players leave, I wouldn't see any great rush to go and sign players. There might be one or two that Chris Davies might think, oh, we need to do that, or one, whatever. But I think it will largely be about if someone who hasn't been playing as much, i.e. Dion Sanderson, says, I want to go and explore my options and play football elsewhere, then we're obviously going to need to replace him. So an option will have to come in. Hopefully Blues will make themselves stronger. I can't see Chris Davies, green lighting anything that's going to make Blues weaker, because let's face it, I think probably 2/3 of the season are going to be played in the second half, aren't they? So Blues need to have a big, strong squad. And, they're not going to want to weaken themselves in any way.
Yeah, indeed. Which I think about covers everything, does it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Just to say that there'll be a press conference coming up in the next couple of days, so we'll react to that. Football breaks out again on Saturday lunchtime. It's a 12:30 kickoff, isn't it?
It is.
Against Shrewsbury this Saturday. And then it's away to Exeter, and then it's an FA Cup match with Blackpool a week on... is that right? A week on Sunday? So there's the football is nearly back. So thank you, Alex, for your time, and thank you all for your attention. And it's a keep right on from both of us.